Okay. Terrific. All right. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
I'm so delighted to be welcoming you here with us this afternoon. It's a beautiful Wednesday afternoon. My name is Sophie. I am the Director of Visitor Services and Program Management at the museum at Eldridge Street. We are so fortunate today to have Lucy Shahar organizing this program, bringing in such phenomenal speakers from all over the world. And since the pandemic, all of our programs have been moved online. So I invite you to continue to subscribe to our newsletters and follow us on social media to stay connected on all of our other exciting upcoming events. I will say that we are reopening on June 1st, starting next week. And we will be offering free admission for the entire month of June. So I very, very much hope to see you all then in person. So we're really, really excited. Lucy is going to be introducing our special guests today, but just a reminder before she takes over, everyone's microphones are muted right now, and you will be able to unmute yourself during the program when you want to ask questions. And to ask a question, you can either type them in the chat box or you can raise your hand during Q&A and we'll call on you. And I also want to point out that we are offering closed captioning today. So you can turn that feature on and off by clicking on the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And it is being powered by AI, so there's going to be some inevitable typos. Please excuse us for those typos. And thank you again for choosing to spend your afternoon with us here at Eldridge Street. And Lucy, please take it away.
I will. Good afternoon, everyone. For Alice in London, good evening. I've never interviewed Oscar winners before, and if you take a look, you'll see, if you have the gallery view, you will see Alice with the Oscar that she and Anthony share. According to Alice, it's very heavy and gold. Okay, I just wanted to do some housekeeping details. Our final session for this season will be on June 15th when we are doing the movie Minari, and our guest will be Michelle No, who is a Korean-American journalist working in for the Times based in Berlin. And of course, you will receive the announcement about it. I would like to thank my friend Joan Freilich, who is a French speaker and who alerted me to the movie Colette, after which I rushed to get on Twitter so that I could contact Anthony and Alice. A few words about our guests. I'll start with Anthony Giacchino, who is an American. He is the director, and he is an Emmy Award filmmaker living in New York. His last documentary, The Giant's Dream, tells the story behind Academy Award winning director Brad Bird's first feature film, The Iron Giant. He was nominated for Writers Guild of America Award for achievement in writing, and Giacchino is a former Fulbright scholar at the Albert-Ludwigs-Universität in Freiburg, Germany. Alice Doyard, if I can find this now. Yes, one moment. Is a producer. She is also an award-winning French producer and director with credits that include The Confined, A Story of Hidden Children, The Remarkable Resistance of Zilo, Resistance Women, The Fight Against Hitler in Berlin. She is widely recognized for her skill in finding powerful human stories in places as diverse as the battlefields of the world wars, the forests of the Congo. Her work for BBC News on the downfall of the dictator Robert Mugabe was awarded with a Golden Nymph at the Monte Carlo Television Festival. Thank you so much for being with us, both of you. Congratulations again. As we talked before we went on, I know how many interviews you've been in and how many times you've heard these questions. And it's going to be hard to sound fresh, but I'm sure you will. So let me just ask you, how did you meet Colette? And how did you get involved in making the movie? Whoever wants to go first. Okay. You're muted.
There you go. Yes. I had been trying to unmute myself, but now I was successful.
Good.
Thanks for the introduction. And I think I can speak for Elise to say that we are very happy to be here. It was it's interesting because this was sort of like one of, I mean, Lucy, when you talk about like immediately going to Twitter, this is true. I will confirm that because like this was like, you know, one of the first like post, you know, things that said, yes, we would love to do this. And we're really happy to be here. So in terms of how did we find Colette, we found Colette by chance. We didn't know anything about her, or, you know, we didn't know her story, but Elise and I were together in Normandy searching out stories of World War II. We had a really wonderful tour guide who was showing us around the battlefields, and just in conversation, he said, hey, you know, I know a woman who was in the French Resistance when she was a young girl. Her name is Colette. I'd be happy to introduce you. If you think that would be appropriate, I'll make that introduction. And we were like, oh, that sounds interesting, because it's not, you know, you generally don't, when you think of the French Resistance, you don't usually think of young girls, right, who were in the resistance. So she just on the surface just sounded like, yeah, that sounds like it could be an interesting opportunity. But at that time, you know, when we learned about it, I was just on a scout over there with Elise. I needed to go back to New York, so we didn't meet her on that trip, but it was like, Elise, well, I mean, maybe you should just look into her, you know, follow up. And like, that's really how we first heard about her. But it was like when Elise called me sort of after talking with her and stuff, and I'll let Elise tell that story, that we were like, oh, she really sounds interesting.
Yes, I talked to Colette and organized an interview for when Anthony was back from the US. And we had an amazing interview with this woman. So I had already worked on a resistance resistant fighter. And I could see that she was very strong as a character. And with Anthony, after this first interview, because it was our first idea was to make a 3-minute interview about Colette. But at the end of the interview, we looked at each other and thought, wow, she deserves more than just an interview. We need to embark her on a real story, but to show who she is and the impression she had on us as she had a very strong mind. She had a very vivid memories of the war. She was strong. She had a very frank tone, but very tender as well. When she was trying to transmit her emotions to us. So we thought we need to show this in a real in a film where we would do a real story. We would go embark her on a real story. And then we discussed with Anthony about what story we could tell with Colette. And Anthony knew Dora. He had filmed over there. And he told me, wow, such a coincidence. Colette's brother died in Dora and she has never been there. Maybe you could convince her to go with us on this trip to Dora. And so this, after months of conversation with Colette, we created a bond of trust that she would do this pilgrimage with the team. It was a bond of trust, and we organized. She knew that we would respect her voice, and we would be very careful for how she felt, and because we wanted to build bridge with the younger generation, Anthony and I, we had this idea that we need to embark also young people. So we looked for young people who would come with us and Colette. And we happened to find Lucie through Dora and the Museum of La Coupole in France, because they have a strong connection. They sometimes you give a call and someone gives you a name, who gives you another name. And so suddenly, over the phone, I had an historian, director of La Coupole, who told me, I don't have any young people going to Dora anymore just now, this year, but I have a very interesting young historian. She's 17. The age of, we discovered that later on, that she was the age of Jean-Pierre's when he got arrested. And we thought, okay, Lucie sounds good. We called Lucie. She was a nice young French historian, aspiring historian. And we thought, okay, let's do this like that. They both agreed. And they met for the first time in front of our camera. And with Anthony, we said, yeah, sometimes you make film and we discover that magic happened in front of your camera. This is what happened.
Yeah, and I would just, if I could just say, one thing, like at least that said something really, I think, important, because it does go to the film itself. And I think what we were able to do was, I think in anyone that you want to be involved in the documentary that you're doing, you have to build that trust. But it was clear with Colette that as incredible a character as she was, that in some ways, and she was older. She was 90 years old, right? I mean, this was asking a lot of her to make this journey. That I think what was great, what Elise did was, in these conversations, kind of drew out of her, like, what would it mean for you to do this? Like, why would you? Because we couldn't. I mean, we loved the idea of it on the surface. We were just like, this would be great if we could do it. But it really needed to be Colette's choice. You've all seen the film. I mean, you could probably imagine she could never be forced to do anything she didn't want to do. But that was really the great work that was done ahead that allowed for that trust, and that allowed, I think, Colette to open up emotionally. Without that work that happened ahead of time, I think, not only would it have been kind of a different film, but it may never have happened.
It sounds as though it's almost a therapeutic process, drawing things out of Colette, who struck me at the beginning as a difficult somebody who had made decisions. She would never go to Germany. She spent most of her life forgetting this. And to open it up again, it is an enormous trauma. I just wanted to know, in addition to your work with her, Alice, how did her connection with Lucie contribute to establishing the trust?
You're right, Lucie. It's really interesting because I do believe that Lucie, being reserved and young, and Colette being expansive and as having experience, there was something very strong between them. And Colette was caring. She cared for Lucie as much as Lucie also cared for Colette. If I may say care, yeah, she was. Yeah. They were careful with each other, and they were, and this made the emotions much maybe more expressed, because they were they wanted to help each other in this difficult or this moving pilgrimage in the past.
I would say it was what was interesting is that I don't believe either of them, who didn't know each other until they met on camera. When you see them meeting, like this is the first time that they met. But I don't believe either of them could have imagined the impact the trip would have had on them, because Lucie herself, was very shy and reserved, very serious. You know what I mean? Like if you actually sit and have a conversation with her, like, you're like, okay, wow, she seems older than 17. But certainly she saw herself going, and she says it in the film, she saw herself going on like this big adventure with Colette. And I don't think she knew the impact it was going to have, and neither did Colette. And she admits it at the end, saying, how could I have cried in front of strangers? Right. So they also go into this thing, I think, with one set of like, how this is going to work and kind of come out differently. And that's like, for filmmakers, like you can't control that kind of stuff, right? Like that's what you would hope for. And, we were fortunate but that all goes back again to this idea of trusting the people that you're working with, so that you can just feel comfortable to evolve on camera. So, yeah, I mean, there were a lot of, we were just very fortunate on many fronts with this film.
That brings me to, what was your original vision of what the film was going to be? And of course, it came out differently.
Yeah, I mean, the vision. It's we basically, we set the parameters. This woman who was, as a young girl in the French Resistance, had never been to Germany. Her brother was captured, died in a concentration camp. What would that journey be like going there? I mean, like that sort of was just the rough, that's like kind of the blueprint. And then we can, through finding Lucie, who seemed to be the right person to take this, so that Colette, we can also talk about transmitting this history. That's as much as you can do. And then the film was going to sort of become what it was, how they react, what they see. It's kind of hard to guide beyond sort of the broad sketches of it.
But we had just brought indeed idea that we wanted to talk about transmission to young generation, and we wanted to also to do like something like history in action.
Okay.
Not only an interview, but history in action.
That's right. Yeah. So the that like we often talked about this. I mean, it became apparent afterwards, but we also liked to see their pilgrimage, which is what they ended up calling it, as a continuation of Colette's resistance at the time, right? That Jean-Pierre may have been lost there, but that Colette, in some sense, had the last word by sort of going there and sort of confronting this, and the resistance also of remembering, right? That Lucie embodies as a young historian, and as kind of slowly convincing maybe, or helping Colette realize that this is a time that is better remembered, as no matter how painful it is, than just forgotten, right? Because that's the kind of the tension between them, Colette's will to forget so she can just live her life and and Lucy's will and want to remember this so that we don't repeat this stuff. And you know, and that all of that kind of stuff, like we didn't plan that. We didn't like think that that's you know what ultimately what we were going to say, and that kind of came out naturally as they got to know each other and took the journey.
It blossomed.
Yeah.
It sounds like the story of how you made it and what you experienced is as interesting as the film itself.
Oh, yeah.
Really, I'm
Yeah.
sure, yes.
No, there's no doubt, because you know we no, it's true, because as a crew, and there were, you know, about I think 11 or 12 of us all together, and interestingly, what you know, we were from the United States and France and Germany and England and Italy and Belgium and the Netherlands. Like we were from all over the place, sort of as a crew, and it never. I mean, I thought about a lot while we were filming this. So we were telling this, you know, modern pilgrimage, but the backdrop was World War II. And there were many times when I thought to myself, you know, if this had been 75 years earlier, we could have been trying to kill each other, right? The members of this crew. And it just, it not like to think of that not only sort of, you know, made me sort of sad to a point, but it also actually just made me angry. Like this, you know, like the stupidity of that, right? And how many people, even in that conflict itself, you know, probably would have been happier and done so, you know, going out to be, you know, I mean, I don't want to make it too flowery, but it is true, right? I mean, this idea of community. Yeah.
But such a victory to be together, to make together a film 75 years later.
Yeah.
Apropos of anger, which comes out, her anger, Colette's anger, is so visceral in the film. Can you talk about a little bit about the dinner in Nordhausen and where she just couldn't go on? That must have been a key moment for you in your experience and in the filming.
Yeah,
and in terms of trust.
Yeah, I mean, we all we had a different viewpoint of that night, and I think Elise and I can tell like just kind of different angles of that. But I'll just say, for context, that was our first night in Nordhausen. It was important for us as a crew that just in general that we would have dinners together. It's just it's a nice community building thing among the crew, and you're kind of understand that you're all making this film together. And like that's really what it was about. We were not there to shoot a scene for the film. Somebody who was on the ground in Nordhausen who had been helping us just get some permissions, help us meet some. He's an interesting guy. His name is Jens Bonisch. He works for the police department he's a police inspector in Nordhausen, and he has an interesting job in that he trains young recruits on the history of National Socialism in Germany and how police units can be misused by the states, and and he brings them to Dora. So it's really interesting what he does, and I really liked him, and he had kind of helped us. So I had said, do you want to meet us for dinner? We're going to be going. And then he brought the former mayor, right? So it was like, again, we didn't set this up, but then Jens tells me, he wants to say something, he wants to welcome Colette, and I didn't have any problems with that. I thought, that's fine. And then our DP Rose was like, well, I probably should just film this. We have the camera here. We were always like ready to film something if we needed to. So the camera was there, and Rose, she picked up the camera, and I'll pass it over to Elise, because Elise is the one who like picks up on like, wait, what's the matter with Colette?
Yes, it's interesting, this scene also, because we were not totally ready ourselves. We are filming like this. You see all the crew, and but it gives you a good example of how we worked all through the film, which was reacting, proposing and reacting, proposing sequence to Colette and reacting to her reactions. So we are there, and the mayor is talking in German about his childhood. And he speaks in German. I translate. I see that Colette is not comfortable. So we first make a pause. And then finally, she really says no. And we do believe that it has triggered things in her with maybe the language, maybe the childhood memories of the former mayor. And she said she felt back in 43. Herself in the Nazi occupied France, and so suddenly we see the anger coming, and we decide to cut, because this was our protocol with her. If she wanted us to stop, we would stop. So we did stop, but it's really interesting to see that we were she's someone very much in control.
Yeah.
But here she had strong emotion coming, and which was anger. And the following day, she had other types of emotions that arrived. That it was sadness in the camp.
Yeah.
So it's the opening of her emotions.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we didn't, I mean, I thought what the mayor was saying was interesting, just sort of sitting there listening, being there real time. But I also kind of feel that he wasn't, he didn't like read the room properly. And he kind of like, I could also just understand Colette, the way she reacted. Also, in a sense, is like, hey, I also came here for dinner. I didn't want to hear kind of a lecture or what the war was like for you, right? Like I really do understand, and that sort of is where he was going with that. But after we did it, and I think we didn't really like think about it that much after it happened, but it was only like going back into the edit room and seeing this stuff again. It was like, oh, because I don't think we looked at the stuff, and seeing Colette like hit her hand on the table like that and just saying like, enough of this, that it was sort of clear that this was a sort of a turning point, kind of in a way, for the film. It wasn't intended. I don't know. I've been told by a number of people who watched the film that they imagined that maybe she's not going to go at this point, which was not the intention of putting that in there, but it's kind of interesting, you know what I mean, that how people were reading into that. But it's definitely a crucial scene, as you say.
A crucial scene, and a prelude to the other crucial scenes when, as you said, Elise, the anger doesn't come out so much as the grief and the sadness.
Yeah.
Were those difficult moments for you in the filming when she breaks down and she almost couldn't go on?
Yeah, that's true. That we all you spoke about the effect, the impact it has, this filming on the crew before, and I must say that you don't go and film into a concentration camp without being deeply moved and living part of yourself in the place. And all the more that the level of emotion that Colette and Lucie expressed touched all of us. And indeed, as soon as when we arrived, just after in the following morning, when we arrived in the camp, it's a scene that we did not show in the film, but that was really intense for the crew. I was in the car with Colette and Lucie, and Anthony was waiting for us in the camp with an earpiece, and there was a silence in the car. Normally, Colette loves to chat, but then suddenly a silence when we arrived, and we drove through the forest that surrounds the camp. And she says, in the silence, look, listen, all these trees might remember what happened here 75 years ago. And he grabbed us, and we all started to feel tears coming to our eyes. And Anthony, I let you say what.
So I was just, we were waiting because we had a predetermined spot where the van would come, and they would get out. And that was around that location where they went to where Jean-Pierre had been sleeping, where his barrack was. So we couldn't all fit in that car. And we also didn't want to pack that car with people to sort of allow the space for Colette and Lucy to have. But so I'm sitting there with my earpiece just waiting. And the first thing I hear, it's like they're coming into range, is that I hear that they're crying inside the car, but I'm not sure what's happening. And that was just sort of a prelude for what was, what was to come when they come. And it absolutely, it really hurt the moment when she realized she didn't bring flowers, right? And then she's saying that. It was just like, it was like being stabbed through the heart, listening to her kind of, come to that realization, that she didn't think about that. Why didn't she do that? And then, obviously you could see the impact it had on Lucy immediately right there as well. So yeah, she's right. I mean, Elisa's right. Like, you kind of don't, not a film like this, you give part of yourself for sure, there. It would be impossible not to.
I think the theme of Colette losing control is very interesting, because she was so invested in keeping control.
Yeah.
And here's a situation where that would be impossible.
Yeah.
I want to ask you both of you something else. I think you mentioned, yes, go ahead, Elisa.
I just need to plug my computer, sorry.
Okay. Can you hear me though? You can hear me. Yeah. Somebody mentioned about the French historical myths about the resistance, like everybody was in it.
Yeah.
And versus the historical reality. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that? What do you think the French historical myths were?
Yeah.
Especially when you see that in stories about the resistance. Yeah.
So I'll just, if at least if I just could say something about that from the viewpoint of an American.
Please.
I think part of this was the Americans making at the time, in some ways, because, you grow up here, I think, with this idea of the French resistance, and the impression is that, France was sort of silently fighting against the occupation, right? And I think that there was a lot of propaganda on the American side of that, even, during the war, especially like the old newsreels, as the Americans are coming in and they talk about, the French resistance. And there's these really amazing footage of stuff that was happening in Paris, which we actually have in our film. And it certainly is brave. But I was sort of shocked by that statistic, where it was 1%. Yeah, 1% of the population actively resisted before the June 44 invasion of France. So I was sort of shocked by that, and that was brought up by Lucy, in the film. So it kind of was clear to me that that should be in, but not in a way to condemn. It was more kind of as an enlightening response. And we actually talked to Colette about it. It doesn't go into the film because it's just too much of a thing. She doesn't hold much against people who are on the fence. People who actually actively collaborated, she might have some choice words to say, but people who are on the fence, she says she understands that. But anyway, that's what I feel like the Americans pushed a big myth about the French resistance also to kind of, help at home, during the war, to say, hey, we've got these allies in France also who are helping.
I would suspect, I want to hear Elise, but as a former history teacher, I would think the French also contributed to
Oh,
that.
yeah. Well,
Yes.
yeah.
Alors, yeah, so I would like to say two things. First, indeed, it's difficult to have data, but we managed to have this 1% of active resistant fighters. This is what all the people who asked for a card of former fighters, when after the war they asked for a special card, but there was a lot of resistance fighters who did not ask for any recognition. And for example, my grandparents, they both were. My grandmother was hiding Jews in her house together with her children, and my grandfather, he was smuggling. I mean, he was using papers to give to the printers so that they would print posters for the resistance. So, but none of both of them, they never asked for any recognition. So, like we say that it's more than 1%. 1% was active, but you could say that 10% of the French population was more or less resisting. But what is very interesting indeed is that on the other side of the spectrum, you have the same amount of people that were collaborating. Although the collaborators, they were sometimes policemen or civil servants or at the top level of the government, so they had more power. So you had these two populations again active in the country, and a huge part of the population that was doing not nothing, but just they were pondering, like waiting for like trying to understand what was the situation before taking action. And this is something that we discussed and thought about a lot also while we were filming, because it's in any extreme situation when your country is occupied, it's not easy to take a side, to take a stand.
Yeah. From
one side or the other side, and indeed it demands a lot of clarity, maybe a moral strength to say, okay, I'm going to take a risk because I believe this is true, even though now the new rules would condemn me for what I'm doing.
Can I just want to follow up on something that Elise is saying, and to connect it to Colette, and we know that they were among the active resistance, but you know, one thing that has always stuck out to me, and I think it's a great example, is that, you know, Colette talks about, oh, I wasn't a hero, I just sat on a stone and I was writing down the numbers of license plates, you know, of German cars and stuff like that. Certainly crucial information, that's for sure. But she also told us about you know, during the occupation, that she would make bouquets of flowers that her brother Jean-Pierre, then in the middle of the night, would get on his bike and go to the graveyard and place on the graves of resistance who had been executed. Okay, that was forbidden, to honor, you know, anyone who was executed for. So I see Colette's sitting down at this young girl making these bouquets to be put on there, symbolic for sure, but that to me is active resistance, right? It's an active resistance, putting those flowers on those graves. And I would say that's what got Jean-Pierre arrested. That someone in his group was caught and sort of gave him up. They were collecting weapons and stuff, but also he was the one who was putting flowers on the graves, you know, so that sort of was one of the charges against him when the Gestapo arrested him. So, you know, I think, you know, resistance can mean many things, not just, you know, taking arms, right, and sort of fighting, you know, the enemy is there, but putting flowers on the grave, at least in my book, means a lot.
Yes. Elise, did you want to add anything to that?
No. I mean, it's just that indeed, what I could say that that's true that in France there's there's still work to do with facing history with honesty. And voilà. So there were.
I was going to say we recognize that in this country too, Elise. Yeah, I mean, in some ways, that's a bigger message of the film, right? That it sort of, looking into your past and facing your past, and that's why I hope that people would, not just make this one-to-one. Oh, this is only a film about France and the French resistance and Nazi Germany and all that, but that I think the bigger lessons are facing the past honestly. Looking.
One last question before I open it up to the group.
Yeah.
I gather you do not consider this a Holocaust film. Is that correct? Wanted to make that.
No, not directly, because I mean, we understand, the Holocaust was, the programmed, what I mean, specifically was the attempt to annihilate the Jews of Europe. And
without any reason, without any grounding. For
no other reason than that, because they were Jewish, right? And Jean-Pierre is not Jewish, Colette, he was arrested. Yes, he died at a concentration camp, but for resisting the Nazi occupation. And that's why he died. So we were always very careful. We didn't want to we didn't want to conflate the two, nor did we want to sort of disrespect what the Holocaust means as a specific event. That's really what it was about. It was about being very careful with our language and historically how this fits into the Nazi persecution during that period.
I think you succeeded. Yeah. I would like to open it up now, Sophie, to everybody. Your questions to Elise and Anthony.
Yes, Miriam has her hand raised. If you could just unmute yourself, Miriam, and perfect.
Okay. Thank you so much for spending time with us and for your film. I just wanted to mention, for me, one of the most moving, if not the most moving scenes is when Colette gives her ring, or her brother's ring. And I just wondered, did you know that was coming? Were you ready for that? How did that shot happen? Because I thought it was symbolic of the whole theme of the movie, that she's old and leaving, and here is the memory. It is yours now.
I'll just say, I want to say in a broad sense of this, and then I'll let, however, at least once. But you're right. That scene, like, to me, when I talked before about Colette's, will to forget, so she would survive, versus Lucy's, will to remember so that we could survive, and how I said that maybe Lucy helped convince Colette that it was okay to remember. Like, that scene right there really embodies that, because Colette is then saying, okay, we have to remember this, and I'm going to pass this down to you, so you hold it for the next 100 years, and then would remember this. So it was like the perfect symbol, for that.
That's what I thought. I mean, as a filmmaker, you can't dream about that kind of a shot. It's like,
how it happened is that she came to us and said, before we left a place, before we left Caen, she came to us and said, I thought that maybe it could be a good idea to make a present to Lucie, as you exchange presents at the end of an important moment. And we said, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do this at the end of the filming. and it happened to be to symbolize so well what happened. But this was, this maybe the documentary luck that it's of course you think all these are good ideas, but when they happen, it's and you are, when you make a documentary, it's very different from a film in the sense that fiction, in the sense that you adapt to what's coming. You walk at the rhythm of your protagonists, who shares their life, shares their wishes, share their experience, and this is what we did.
Yeah.
She wanted to offer this ring. We thought, wow, that's a nice idea.
Yeah, and Lucy had no idea that was coming, and the fact that Colette wouldn't have even known like what would have happened before that. So we really had just come out of the crematorium. She was talking about her mother, like what her mother would have thought, had she been able to visit the camp. And what would she say? So it just sort of fell, it fell together like that, and then became sort of just a beautiful symbol in the film.
We have other questions, Sophie?
Yes, I think Susan Keith, you had your hand raised.
Well,
Susan,
I had, first of all, thank you both so much. It's such a powerful documentary. And I actually lived in, what I was going to say first was I lived in France not long after the war. And I would say, I think you actually, both of you expressed, well, first of all, Anthony, I was not sure about how your feelings about being the resistance being sort of an American idea. I think Alice expressed it well, that my experience was most people said they were part of the resistance. And when I saw the 1%, I was shocked. And I think it's sort of like exactly what you expressed about your grandparents, that people might have had an effort, but they were not formally part of the resistance. So that was one comment I wanted to make. And then you actually expressed it better than I did. So I think that's my sense of the time. And the other thing is, I also thought, I think you gave Colette, which I thought was so amazing. I don't know that she would have taken the opportunity to go back had you not offered that experience to her. Yeah. And it's how, I think there are many people that would benefit from like facing history, but they don't have the opportunity to have someone basically take them by the hand and go there with them. And I think you offered that experience to her.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's very nice of you.
Yeah. No, you're right. Hopefully, the fact that we were able to help her get there and document this sort of, and then being able to show it to so many people, sort of puts it on a stage where people might kind of consider, and that's again what I said before, that we hope that this isn't just people just don't think about France and the French resistance, right. And that they might see how could this apply to me in sort of my own country's history.
Are there any other questions, Sophie?
Yes, I thought Carol has her hand up. Carol, would you unmute yourself, please, and ask your question?
Hi. I was wondering, being that Colette seemed to be a woman who had guarded her emotions for years and years and had to go through a process where she could let go a little bit, and she was feeling the pain of what happened, was she willing to watch the completed documentary?
Very much, yeah. Because as you see, she's also someone who's in control, even though she finally let it go in Germany and offered us her vulnerability. She is someone in general who's very much in control of her emotion, of what's going on, and she was really keen on watching the final film. And she with Anthony, we had decided that I would go to Caen with the film to show as a private viewing. And she, so it was on a computer. And she paused. I mean, she watched it like it's 25 minutes, but she watched it in more than an hour because she paused. She made some comments about and then she continued, and then she paused sometimes in silence. Okay, and she continued, and yeah, she was really. And at the end of the film, when it was over, she turned to me and she said, "Bon travail les petits," which is good job, kids.
Yeah, I would say, you know, on that point is that we had considered, I actually zoomed in at the very beginning of it.
You're right.
And then before you started watching it, I don't know, I didn't want there to be any pressure on Colette. And of course, I mean, that would be very hard because, like, you know, she is who she is, and, you know, but I still kind of felt like I didn't want to be this kind of hovering over her shoulder presence. And I said, at least just call me when you guys are done. You know, let me know. And I just stopped, you know, I stopped the Zoom. But I was really happy to hear her reaction.
Did she continue a relationship with Lucy? Do you know?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. They are.
I felt it was a much more emotional piece than a historical one. It was lovely. It really was.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I mean, you know, this is, I mean, it's something that actually Elise said from the stage at the Oscars, right? What it also is, right? It wasn't that, like, you know, I sort of kind of spoke to sort of the history of it. And I think, Elise, you were talking about like the emotion, right? Sort of like the bigger picture.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, it's also, yeah, but what why we were so moved ourselves while doing this film is that it's a relationship between Colette and Lucie, and the relationship between Colette and her own mother.
Oh, that was awful.
Yes.
That was rough.
Yeah.
That brings to mind a question that I have. Do you think she was healed from the trauma she experienced during the war? And then how much healing took place?
That's a good question, Lucy. I mean, it's a question. I mean, there's clearly this process is talked about, and we thought about it with Anthony. We thought, is healing possible, and is it going to be part of what this experience would mean in Colette's life? Is it going to be a new phase of her life where she has gone through the experience, maybe the pain, to go back to the place and to reopen the wound, and maybe be more honest and maybe more at peace, or maybe this belongs to Colette. And sometimes she says yes, she has healed for some part of it, and sometimes she says no, it's still very rough. So it belongs to her, but clearly it calls to everybody. I mean, to me, at least as a filmmaker, but I think to Anthony and to the people we talked to, that it calls to us about the honesty of looking at our own wounds.
Yes, and the price we pay for doing that or not doing that.
The price of courage.
Yes.
Indeed.
Sophie, are there any other questions there?
Looking to see if anyone else has their hands raised. Don't see anyone. And if you're feeling shy, you can always type them in the chat box too.
Yeah.
I'm going to open the door to my dog who's running around.
Sure. Looks like Miriam has another question or comment.
We have another one. It's really about the Academy Award. I didn't see it. And I just would like to hear what that means to you, what the process was like, whether this was something you hoped for, or was it just this, just the reception of the film? Is this something you anticipated?
Well, I mean, I think that any filmmaker would like dream of that, right? For sure. That like we'll just sort of say that like everyone will say, oh, it's amazing, you know, winning an Academy Award. So I think the most important thing that it does is it raises the visibility of the film, right? It's interesting because, you know, even in the little ways that you can measure, you know, who has watched the film, how many people watched it. I think the week or the days before, for example, the award, there were like, at least on The Guardians, which is the platform, you know, that hosted the film, I think there were like 180,000 views on it. And, you know, very quickly, it's, you know, now nearly 500,000 people have seen it. So, it, you know, people, it just brings a visibility to the film that you could never get otherwise. You know, that's for sure. So that's been really important. And then I just think that, you know, it's nice to, I mean, the people who sort of, who nominate you for this, understand what it is like to actually make a film, or what it takes to make a film, sort of, you know, the struggle and just the difficulties, you know, and also, you know, parts of the fun, you know, of it. So it's really nice. I mean, I always, you know, you always hear like, oh, it's an honor just to be nominated. And you kind of like always hear that. And I've sort of grown up like listening to people say that, but I do understand that now. Because it are the people who your colleagues are saying, you know, good job. You know what I mean? I know what that takes, and and you know, I want to recognize you this way. So yeah, but really, for the most part, it's the visibility of the film. You know, more people will know this story. And I would add, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Elise, I think there must not, I mean, unless you've been hiding under a rock in France, I think everyone must know who Colette is in France. I mean, like you know, she's become sort of a star there, right? Because of this. And I'm not saying like that's the great thing about this, but it just, you know, kind of, you know, goes to show you the visibility this can give you.
Yeah, I mean,
Someone actually had a follow-up question to that. They asked, the follow-up question to that was, what was Colette's reaction to winning the Academy Award?
Alors, yeah, she loves the visibility. She's really happy with the visibility it brought, and she's the best ambassador for the film.
Yeah.
So it's really but what I want also to say is that for maybe I will speak for me. I think that Anthony might have come with another background, but in my personal history of filmmaking, there's this idea that to give voice to people who have a story that moved me, and that I believe is interesting to share. And I have this idea that to give voice to people can be one of the great jobs of a filmmaker. So that stories are told and people are heard. And this is with this film, and finally with the Oscar, this is the summum, the climax of what you can, what you how not loud, but how widely a voice can be heard.
Yeah, I think that's I agree with that, and also just in, you know, alongside or coupled with that, I would say that we all, in some ways, obviously, I mean, Colette is a unique person and situation, and her story, you know, is unique, but it's also what I find fascinating about that. And also, you know, the award itself is that it also kind of shows that, you know, we all sort of play out our own stories against the backdrop of these like larger events, whether it be World War II, whether it be what we're currently living through right now, you know, you name it, that there are stories everywhere. In terms of World War II, I think I would happily, if I could, finish my career making stories from this time period, because I just find it so dramatic and painful, inspiring, you know, and so crucial. And I'm just glad that the tour guide said I know someone named Colette. Right?
I think our time is up unless there is a last question. I can't thank you enough. It's been very, I wouldn't even say enlightening, although it's been enlightening, but very moving to hear your comments. And of course, the movie is a heartbreaker and wonderfully done. So thank you again for submitting to the same questions you've been asked.
No, this has been
It's a
great.
pleasure.
It's always, I as you know, it's the only constant question really is, how did you find Colette? Otherwise, it's great. I really enjoyed this conversation. And I'm also glad, oh, this is the other thing. I did want to say this in relation to one of the questions. I sort of lost the thread of it. Is that, oh, when I was talking about measuring, right? Like that you could say, oh, 400,000 people, 500,000 people almost
Right.
have seen this film. But to me, what I really love thinking about is, because I don't know any of you who are here watching this, and yet you've all seen the film. So, you know, that means that we've been able to sort of at least get our work in front of people we don't know, and hopefully move them in some way. You know, whether it just is because they felt that they watched a good film, or it gets them thinking about their you know, sort of their own history or something. There's a real, I think, sort of unseen power in filmmaking that filmmakers are not really aware of. You know, sort of the ripples that kind of go out and what it does. You know, so I do think about that, and I'm happy to see all of you and that you've watched it.
Thank you, Anthony. Elise, you have last words before?
Yeah, I just wanted to finish like this, because at the beginning I had no time to really tell you how honored we were to be tonight at the Eldridge Museum, and to be able to speak about this film, because we is part of us, Anthony, me, and all the crew that we represent tonight. But really, it's an honor to speak about this film that matters to us.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for your attending and participation.
Thank you all so much, Anthony, Elise. It was really such a pleasure and really an honor. Our audience members, thank you for joining us at this unusual time in the afternoon at 2 o'clock. But I hope to see all of you at the museum very, very soon in person when we reopen. So
Sophie, I'm going to make maybe over the summer, I'm going to make a stop there, because I've never been, even though I lived on 5th Street between 2nd and 3rd.
Please do.
Yes. All right.
Oh, terrific. Yes. Yeah. And we'll be sure to give you a tour too of the museum. Let us know when you have both of our email addresses.
Yep.
So
I would love that.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.